Hi, I'm Yermit, and I'll be the first negative for the exclusionary rule. The exclusionary rule is one of the most integral system passed by the U.S. court, since it is the rawest form of enforcement that upholds our Fourth Amendment. It promotes our society's commitment to the Constitution values. Without it, it renders the amendment as just a jumble of words with no meaning behind it. Allowing people to bypass it through monetary fines would only demonstrate that as long as you're, a billionaire, as long as you have money, you can bypass and you can become above the law. Ultimately, the exclusionary rule is an extension of our Fourth Amendment, which is the right to our privacy. And with the way our society is heading, we can barely maintain a sense of privacy, and now our personal homes are being attacked. In a 2001 case of Kylo v. United States, Danny Kylo was suspected of growing marijuana in his house without concrete evidence to issue a search warrant. Officers instead opt to use thermal technology to peer into to Kylo's residence. The court issued this as a violation of the exclusionary rule, since the surveillance is technically a search and is presumptively unreasonable without a warrant. Now, who's to say they're not going to use this technology to peer into other people's homes? By placing a paywall, this allows officers to do whatever they need to breach our privacy if they see fit. This law is a check and balance that keeps the government from ultimately giving free range to any homes and allowing the options to pay out. It does not only go against our privacy, but also threatens our sense of security in our homes. The Fourth Amendment is also not the only amendment that is not the only amendment grounded by the exclusionary rule, but by extension, the rule also protects our Fifth Amendment from being infringed upon. The Fifth Amendment imposes restrictions on the government's prosecution of persons accused of crimes. It prohibits self-incrimination and double jeopardy and mandates due process of law. In the case of King v. Jane Warshaw confessed to police officers that she had received stolen property from the defendant Thomas Littlepage. Afterwards, Warshaw appealed the verdict because we find out later that she was coerced through fear to confess by officers. Through this case, we can see that the exclusionary rule does not only protect our privacy, but also our sense of security and the way police officers are expected to conduct their investigations. The exclusionary rule benefits individuals by ensuring that police maintain a level of respect for an individual's rights while dealing with the public by protecting them from unnecessary seizures and searches. The rule protects an individual by establishing a system in which the police officers will be required to prove that the tactics used to bring the case upon the individual were within the confines of the law. Under the exclusionary rule, there must be a documented chain of evidence for items to be admitted against the individual. If that documentation does not exist, then it really isn't evidence. By having this rule in place, officers are prevented from creating false evidence or planting evidence. In a recent 2017 hit and run case, officers arrested Ronald Shields, who was charged with felony hit and run. He had a gun in his trunk, and apparently he had cocaine in his possessions. But later, we find out in the body cam video, shows that the LAPD police officer that was frisking him at the time had planted a small bag of cocaine into the suspect's wallet and proceeded to turn on the audio recording of his camera. He did not know that prior to turning it on, it recorded 30 seconds before without audio. So we clearly saw that he had picked up the bag of cocaine, pointed to his partner, and presented that he was going to put it inside his wallet. Upon putting it into his wallet, turning on the audio, he pretended to find the cocaine in the suspect's wallet. This is an example of how, without the exclusionary rule, officers are able to do whatever they please. This law is a guideline for officers to correctly conduct their investigations without infringing on anyone's rights, and by easing the severity of breaking this law threatens the structures of other laws. Ultimately, this law is the bridge that connects the trust established between government and citizens, and allowing a loophole for people to bypass this law would tarnish the established trust and undermine the rights of American citizens.